Okay, so our presenter tonight is Mindy Garber. Her bio is like all the other unpaid, highly unpaid presenters is on the website. And I'm going to let Mindy introduce herself. How's that?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I just want to get started, and then I have a little introduction about myself because I want to set the stage here. So I want to say this: most ventures fail because of people issues and are really a failure of the relationships among the team members. So Joe wrote that in 1994, and I have the original document, and I want to just let you know, even here, 32 years ago, he underlined that sentence: ventures fail. So even then, this was he knew this was a very important issue. Okay. So the agenda here, I want to introduce myself. I'm both a mediator and an engineer. And so what I tell people is the difference between being as an engineer, you gather all the facts and you want to make the optimal decision. As a mediator, it's your job to figure out why people aren't getting together, and why you're helping them have a conversation where you're the neutral person, and you're trying to help them understand and speak to each other and see if there's a deal that they can work out that works for both of them. And I got into the mediation because after finances, getting along is the hardest part of a company, especially for co-founders. And my personal view is that I have seen so many companies fail, not because there was something wrong with the technology, not because of even finances, but because the two partners couldn't get along. And they basically wind up fighting, dissolving the company, and the IP gets thrown in the garbage. So we waste a lot of IP here just because people don't have a way to get along. So that's why I got into mediation, because in engineering, there's a lot of knockdown, drag-out fights. And I thought there must be a more practical way to to go through conflict and resolve things without it getting personal. So that's a little bit about me. Again, this course is interactive. Please raise your hand if I can see you. The lights are right behind the two of you back there, if there's two of you, or at least whoever's back there. So if you have something, try to wave. Okay. So our agenda is, I'm going to talk a very little bit about negotiation itself, and then think about the startup negotiation between co-founders, between intra-company and inter-company, and then we'll do a debrief at the end. Negotiation is really a relationship skill, and it is something that you're going to need when you start your company, throughout your company. It really will help you have difficult conversations with your peers, your managers, and your subordinates. It is something that you will use in your daily life. And so this workshop is really trying to help you think about negotiation and think about how it will help you move forward with your organizations. Okay. So again, I'm going very quickly. I have about an hour here, and I'm trying to go very quickly. But please stop me if you have questions. So basically, there's millions of books on negotiation, and there's really two schools of thought. One of them is very competitive. I win, you lose. I got the money, and you paid more than you wanted to, or whatever. I don't necessarily care about my relationship with you, and it's viewed as a zero-sum game. Anything I win, you lose. The other school of thought, which is based on getting to yes, which is Roger Fisher, and this is what this course is based on. I am an alum of the Harvard program on negotiation, which I do highly recommend. The other way of negotiation to think about is interest-based. It's a problem that we both have to solve together. If we could meet each other's interests, we both could progress further, and the relationship is preserved. So one of the things that Joe and I talk about is there's no such thing as one and done. In other words, if you do a negotiation and the other person feels cheated, that negotiating is going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And also, the person you negotiate with today may move to another company and say, I'm never buying your product again. So when you think about it, your negotiation skills will precede you, or how you are as a negotiator. And in the positive way too, if people feel like they received a fair deal and you were great to negotiate with, they will look to you to do more. So is that you with me so far? Okay, keep going. Okay, so let's start with interests. Interests are what you want. What are your needs? What is it you want to accomplish? Like, what are your goals? What are your fears? What are your concerns? And once you know your interests, that is what will lead to options. In other words, I want to make a big company or whatever. And so what are my options to do that? So typically when we negotiate, you start with a position. I have to have $500. And then when you say, well, why do you need $500? It's like, well, you broke my fence, and it's going to cost me $500 to fix it. So your interest is you want your fence fixed. And there could be a lot of other options. For example, my brother is in the fence fixing business, and he could do it for free. So what this is trying to say is that as engineers, we tend to start out with positions. This is the right way to do it. And the question you have to ask yourself is why? Why is your position this way? And then that will lead to interest and then getting to different options. So that is sort of negotiation in like 1 minute. So when you're doing startup negotiations, there's sort of three people you're going to have to negotiate with. First of all, your co-founder or founders, then within your company, and then as your company grows, outside your organization. So it's sort of 3 levels, but in order to get started, you have to start with your co-founder. So right now, you guys are all co-founders, and we're going to go through this some exercises together. So everybody has heard of the Founders Agreement. Everybody knows that. There's a million books. MIT has a book. They probably have a class on it. So I'm going to cover that really briefly. But before you get to that, I call it first questions. What are the first questions that you should discuss with your co-founders? And then after you've done your Founders Agreement, something called the Team Agreement. How are you going to start your company, and what you're going to do? So the first questions between founders are, why are you doing this? What does success look like? And what are you giving up to do this venture? And the thing is about the last question, that's almost the most important, because people say, well, I'm giving up going to grad school, or I'm giving up, taking this job to do this. So for a few minutes with your co-founder, I would like you to ask each other these questions and give each other answers. But in addition to doing this, we're going to practice active listening. So when I ask my co-founder, why are you doing this? And they say, I'm trying to solve this problem that I feel is very important to me. And you're going to say, oh, so you're doing this because it's important to you to fix this problem. So I'd like to reframe it and understand it, because I want to practice active listening as well. So does that make sense? And also, we have a lot of people on Zoom. So if you're Zooming from home and you have 2 people Zooming at the same place, do this at home. If you are by yourself Zooming, please write down the answers to these questions, okay? And if you have time, think about what your co-founder would write down if your co-founder were asked these questions. But right now, for people in the room, have this discussion and talk about it. Again, you do not have to give any private, secure information away, but you can talk as generally as you want. Okay? 3 minutes. Okay. Just quick feedback. How many of you are starting companies really with a co-founder? And how many of you have had these kinds of discussions? Okay, good. So that's good. So do you have any feedback on this? Do you think this will be helpful? Okay. So the next thing I have is, and we're not going to really discuss this, but it's honest assessment. I always get asked a lot, who should I pick as my co-founder? You know, who should I work with? And one thing is, I tell them, do an honest assessment of your skills. And I'm not saying that if two people are both mechanical engineers and they invent a widget, that they shouldn't start a company together. I'm just saying that if they do, and they really have mostly mechanical engineering skills, to really understand what skills they each bring, what are their personalities, and what skills will they need, and how will they get it. And there's another question here too, and we all have close relationships that may or may not have skin in our game. And so I think sometimes, depending on the co-founders, really talking about, is there somebody else who is sort of interested in this outcome? In other words, do you have a family at home that's sort of saying, I'm going to give you a year or a time limit, and thinking about those kinds of questions as well to discuss with each other. Because sometimes you don't really know where well, first of all, if it's two students, they're pretty much unencumbered. But it doesn't mean that their families don't want something else for them and may exert some kinds of pressure. So just to think about that. Are there other people in your life that have opinions? Okay. So what you did here is, I call it the circle of interest. You came up with the interests of why you are doing this. And this is a real thing. I helped a startup, and I went through this list of questions. By the way, I have kind of a summary here, if anybody wants to take it at the end, a summary of this workshop. And I went through these questions with them, writing it down. And at the end, I looked up and I said, okay, so did you guys all know this? And you were just sort of going through this with me. And the answer was no, they had not ever had this discussion. And they hadn't even known, they were very interested in doing this company because they were interested in the outcome and doing this work, but they hadn't really understood where each other was coming from. So this was their reasons for starting the company. One of them, I want to be an entrepreneur, learn what it takes to be successful. I want to make a difference in someone's life, because this was the product that they were working on. I've handled a lot of technical issues, and I feel comfortable using these skills in a startup. And the other person was, we've identified a problem that hasn't been solved. I want to learn about tech. I don't really know about tech, but I want to learn more about it. I'm good at detail and execution, and I want to keep expanding my skills. So this circle of interests, I didn't invent this, but what it is, it's a way to get everybody's interests literally on the same page, even if they're not the same interests. It's just really understanding where people are coming from, what their interests are. And I do this for everything. Just try to think about what people's interests are. And especially as a mediator, you try to say, so you're interested in this. And sometimes I get it wrong, but then they'll correct you. So I don't worry about that. Okay. So the founders agreement, I'm going to spend about 1 second on, just because I know there's so much. But it's going to discuss who gets what individual contributions are, the equity discussion, and what happens if one founder leaves, which is one of the very important things that people discuss. And the equity discussion can get really heated. And some ways to think about it are, if you have two co-founders, maybe you have the inventor and then the person who's going to run the company. And at the very beginning, the person who's the inventor is doing all the work. And then as the company grows, maybe the other person's doing more work. So work changes over time for the people. And it's sometimes like we forget like who's doing what when. And also what adds value to the company. So these are just things to think about. But sometimes it's helpful to have a neutral party if things get really heated when you're talking about these things. And students especially find it really hard to have these discussions. So, okay. All right, now we're going to get to the team agreement. So the team agreement is really, anytime two people work together, you have an agreement. And when you walk into a company the first time, like your first day on the job, your job is really to figure out what is the corporate team agreement. So it's really an agreement on how you will work together, what kind of corporate culture you want to create, what roles are required, how are you going to make decisions, and it also provides structure for discussions. So when you write down a team agreement, it's really like how you're going to work together. And I tell people they should write this down, even like to say, oh, we'll have weekly meetings or whatever, because that sets everyone's expectations. And when you've written it down and people aren't meeting the expectations, you can say, hey, in our team agreement, we decided we would do this, and we're not doing it. Is there something we need to change? So one thing that you might want to talk about is culture. And again, company ethics, Google used to say, don't be evil. And you can argue whether or not that's true today, but you and your company really want to think about ethics. And that's something that we don't really talk too much about, is what kind of ethics your company's going to have. And how do you expect people to behave with each other? So, and what I tell people is, if you may start a company, and if you don't create the culture you want, your first hire will, or your second hire. I mean, people will create it for you. So having thought about what you want as a company, how you're going to communicate, when you're going to have meetings. And it's not just about picking software. It's about understanding what process you want. I mean, you can say, okay, we'll meet on Slack, or we'll use Google Docs. But how are you going to share and collaborate on information? So thinking about these things as you're starting your company is really important, because I think a lot of these things happen haphazardly. Companies start by you and I emailing each other, and all of a sudden we have all these emails, and we don't, you have to find which email is about which. Anyway, so are you following along here? Okay, great. Any questions so far? You know all this? Okay, the next thing is roles and accountability. Okay, so your roles are going to change over time, right? Especially if there's just two of you, you're all doing everything, and who's responsible for what. And believe it or not, even with co-founders, sometimes it's not clear, like who's going to do what. And sometimes each person assumes the other person is going to take care of it. So having this discussion up front, like what will you be responsible for? And then the other thing is accountability. I heard your previous conversation is if you have investors, you're going to be accountable to them. If you don't have investors, you're still going to be accountable to each other. And how are you going to manage and document it? If I say I'm going to do something, how is that going to be documented? How are we going to think about that? Okay. The most important thing, though, is how will the team make decisions, and what will you do if you disagree? So I'm going to give you like 2 minutes to talk to your co-founder, and you each own the company 50-50. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you can't agree? Okay, what are some options? Okay, go. All right, so let me know some options if you don't agree. What are some options? What could you do if you 50-50 you don't agree? Yes.
In the article before that they had us read about Jensen Huang, he said that they would split it up so that if there's an impasse on a disagreement, they would just turn to the person who has the backgrounds in the field that they're discussing, and then that person makes the executive choice.
And that ends the discussion, and then there's no further discussion. They all agree to end it right there.
Okay, so they agree that there's one person who's going to be the smartest, who knows the answer. Okay, yes. Go ahead.
It's pretty simple. First seek to understand why there's a disagreement, and you might find in that discussion that one of you changes their mind.
Okay, so have a discussion and see why. Any other choices? Any other options?
I had a case where we were two partners, two co-founders, and were 50-50. And it always was the case. We got some strategy point, and there was no agreement, no possibility to make an agreement. If I were to do it again, one of us should have 51 and the other 49. So there is the way to kind of break even and decide, because otherwise it was endless.
Okay, so you're saying 51-49. And let me tell you something about that. So I have a workshop that I used to teach called Helping Small Businesses Avoid Court. And because this is from all the mediations that I've done in court, I really went home and thought about what could these people have done to avoid coming to court. So I'm also a non-attorney arbitrator with the Massachusetts Bar Association. So I'm not a lawyer, but I'm an arbitrator. And I asked a lawyer that's on one of the panels I serve on for advice, like what for my course. And he has litigated a lot of partnerships. And he actually gave that answer. He said, whatever you do, do not let people do 50-50. And he goes on to tell me about a court case that he was in where the two partners actually physically came to blows in the courtroom. But I said to him, I kind of laughed. I said, that's great, but almost every student team or whatever that I talk to is 50-50. So we better teach them tools so they can avoid coming to you and winding up in court. So, yes.
As a follow-up, is there a scenario which you have a disagreement and you set a timeline on, let's try out, one path and give it, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a 2 weeks, some time frame to then revisit, and then if things are not working, then try the other path? I know some decisions are final where it has ramifications on the choice that you make, but is there a way to set that structure for disagreement? Yeah,
you could say we will. I mean, again, this is you talking to your co-founder and saying, how about if we try this for this amount of time, and if it doesn't work, we'll do the other thing. But there's other things where you could hire a consultant. For example, somebody who knows this field, or get friends or family involved, or get advice. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do, and you could put in a mediation clause. I mean, not me, but no, I'm just saying you could put in a clause like, what happens if we don't agree? And I can tell you that in a lot of contracts, and we'll get to that a little bit, people put in what happens if there's a disagreement, right? What? A prenup. Exactly, it's like a prenup. We're all, and it's funny because someone just said that to me, because he's also a CEO for startups. He does the fractional startup thing. And he says, we're all in love when we start the company, and we're all merrily going along, and then something happens and we go far away and we've stopped talking. So yeah, so this is a way to really document what will happen when things go wrong. So any other comment? Okay. Actually, I want to say one more thing, I think. I guess that's the thing. People don't think that things will go wrong, and because you're all in it, and it's exciting, and thinking about this is really kind of painful, I think, for some people to have this discussion. Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you could email the people who have registered, because I would love to see that.
Okay.
Because when things go wrong, that's when you learn the most, I find.
Yeah, and I honestly, when I'm in court and I'm mediating these civil disputes, I'm very much focused on really like what will help the parties. Like a lot of times they're not communicating at all, and can they work out an agreement? But then when I go home, I think about like what kind of people they were, what kind of job they had, and then also, okay, what could they have done for this event, sort of to not wind up in court. And a lot of it involves documenting something, right? So, okay. So now we're going to do a role play, and this happened here at MIT. And in fact, sometimes we've had the people who this is about be in this class as, I don't know, plants, I think. But anyway, so there was an inventor, Sandra, who invented a really inexpensive way to process crude oil, and some students who wanted to enter a 100K competition. So actually, I used to hand out pieces of paper, and I would like to get 3 volunteers to read this. So could you just hand this to someone and ask them if they can read the next thing? The reason is that it took so long to pass out paper, and by the time I passed it out, so if someone could just read this out loud for me, I would be really happy. Okay, thank you. And then just pass it to someone else there's 3 slides. Okay, please read this.
Overview. Sandra has a prototype, but it can only process 1 cup of crude at a time. Several undergraduates heard about this invention and were introduced to Sandra. They hit it off, and somehow it was decided to enter the 100K competition and perhaps start a company. The relationship between the inventor and the undergraduates was never documented, but the undergraduate began working intensely on writing a business plan. They didn't stop there, though. They made connections with executives at large oil processing companies who, of course, were very interested in the invention. They put in a tremendous amount of time in this venture, sometimes to the detriment of their regular classwork. Just before the competition, however, Sandra is thinking about pulling out, saying her invention isn't ready. This would leave the students disappointed and frustrated that all their work has been for nothing.
All right, hand it to the next person. Go ahead, thank you.
Sandra's invention could only process 1 cup of crude at a time, and she isn't sure how to scale it up or even if the process is scalable. She has no written agreement with the students, and she isn't even sure that students are capable of starting a company. In the end, though, it is her invention, and she feels that she can decide what to do with it.
Okay, hand it to this guy over there would do it. Thank you.
Student's point of view. They are in awe of Sandra. She has a PhD and has invented something that could really be useful and profitable. They are hesitant to bring up uncomfortable subjects like agreements with her, assuming that it will all work out after they've proven to her how much effort they're willing to put into making the company a success. They can't understand her reluctance to move forward faster. When they get a company executive interested, she doesn't seem that excited to speak with them. Also, she doesn't seem to really want to show her invention to anyone, even though from the outside. It just looks like a black box, and no one would be able to see the inside process.
Thank you. So is this a one of? Okay, okay. So what I'd like you to do for this with your co-founder, one of you is going to be Sandra, and one of you is going to be the student. And I would like you to think about what your interests are based on what you've read, okay? So have a quick discussion on what, one of you is Sandra, and one of you is a student, okay? Decide, and then think about what your interests might be. All right. All right. So for the people who were students, please tell me, what are some of the student interests? Who's a student and has an interest? Or even if you're Sandra, you can share, what are some student interests? Yes.
100K, you will have better chance to get a VC funding. One of my classmates just won, and then there's a tons of VC pounding on the table on that. And secondly, we want the product to be commercialized. We already talked to the oil companies, and they showed interest, and the customer is there. I think the VC is looking for technical founders, technology, plus the customers and the paying customer potentially.
Okay, so the students want to start the company. They want to win the 100K. What else, besides winning the 100K and getting all the VC money, is there anything else that comes with winning a 100K competition? Okay. PR, you know, it's good for your reputation, whatever. Okay, are there other student interests? Yes. Right, they want to start a company.
Make money out of it, get
And
funded,
make a
get
lot
an
of money.
exit. Yeah.
Right, prestige, right. So, you know, and they want to have a job when they graduate. Okay, yes. They want a relationship with the inventor.
Let's create an agreement before I've proven myself. So it's hard to have a power hierarchy and then go into it before, you know.
Okay, so they want to prove themselves. Okay, Sandra. Yes, Sandra back there.
I think her interest is whether this technology could be scaled up so that it can secure not only this 100K, but also the more higher amount of the function in the future. So if it is doable and scalable, then it's actually to be able to pull off. But it turns out to be not at this moment. So she decided to stop it.
So her concern is that it isn't scalable. And what does that mean if it's not scalable? What does it mean about Sandra if this is not scalable?
Yeah, if it is not scalable, that means if you got money and you put it off in the future, when it comes to the customer, come to the realistic market, you're not able to solve and serve this realistic market. Then you're not able to make this company to survive with the next round of funding or competitions. So there's no end for her.
Right. So she's concerned about her reputation then, because if this doesn't work, then it's all on her. What else is what else are her concerns? What else are her interests? Yes. Right, she wants to make sure that she controls it. Whatever happens, that she controls it. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to share with you, this is over time, and actually I did when I wrote this case study, I actually shared it with the actual people. And Sandra wants to control her IP. She needs to know that the students have the required experience. She wants to make sure that if she goes with them, that they know how to do this. She wants a clear understanding. She wants her reputation. She also didn't want to be the front man, right? She wanted to just be in the limelight, not in the limelight. She wants to invent things, and she also wants to ensure that the students just aren't doing this to win the 100K, right? Because a lot of times, and I don't know how much, you know, a lot of times when people do things, even if they don't win, she probably would want them to stick around to work on the invention. So the students, they'll get experience writing a business plan, which they did, a career path with a company, and you know, make money, learn about technology, but also solve a real problem. And they are learning to have these discussions with high-level executives. So what I would like you to do is, whoever is Sandra and the student, I'm going to give you some time, work out, and just pick a couple of these interests. Okay, just pick one or two interests from Sandra and come to an agreement that would work for both of you. Okay? So I'll give you like 5 minutes. Just pick a couple of these interests and see if you can come to an agreement between the two of you. Okay, go. Okay, how are we doing? Do you guys need a few more minutes, or have you come to any agreements? How many of you have come to some kind of agreement? No agreements yet? If a few, any of you up? How about in this side? Oh, so you a couple over here, but is anybody over here? What I'm asking is, do you want like a few more minutes, or should we keep going? Okay, okay. So let's talk about people who came to agreements. What was your agreement? Okay.
I mean, we're gonna do it.
That's it? You're just going to do it?
We're gonna do the thing. I'm gonna be the one in the limelight to let Sandra work on her work. We're gonna hopefully make some money, but we're gonna impact the world, and that's what I care about. Maybe Sandra, you can talk a little bit about what you care about.
Yeah, Sandra, why did you agree to this?
Starting off, I was more because when we were talking about this, he initially said that we wanted to make money, and that was an immediate red flag for me because our interests were aligning. I was more focused on making an impact, so that's something I had to communicate to like make him understand that what I'm doing, I want it to be ready to go to the market. So that's something we communicated. The other part was not being in the limelight, and he said he's going to take it in the initial period, and then once I'm more comfortable coming out, I can. And the other part was I wanted him to be more aware of the technology that is being used. So we agreed that we're going to have sessions with the team so that they're more aware of what we're making, so that I feel more comfortable in this team. And it turns out he's a graduate student, but he has 6+ years in the oil industry. So I was like, okay, that's
It
something I
turns out
wasn't
that he's
aware of.
registered what?
He has 6+ years of industry experience already. So that gave me more comfort in knowing that I can trust him to lead this
Okay.
spend.
So what I'm hearing is, one, you established trust. Two, you're going to communicate more. Okay? You're going to really work together to do this, and you're going to meet each other's needs. You're both interested, of course, in the money, but you also, for you, it's very important that you're making a difference, and you felt like that is something that you can take into importance for yourself as well. All right. So you're meeting each other's interests. All right. Yes, up there.
Yeah, the solution we are coming to is trying to find a plan that without hurting each other or without hurting each other's interests, we're trying to pursue maximally for both of the interests. So the way that we suggest is for Sandra, instead of for asking the students to go for this 100K, she could forwarding the student into some of her network so that they could find the job for the students or find some competition of the other company who are interested in the students.
Wait, stop. So I'm just trying to follow along here. So she says, enter the 100K. If you win and I don't want to do it, I will find you somebody else.
Oh, no, not going to 100K, because if you win the 100K, there is a disclosure.
Oh,
so
okay.
we want to find a plan that without disclosure, then students still can get money and still can get a career plan. And then if the students continue want to push on this thing, then we can follow up to do this longer time until it is ready to be scalable or ready to be disclosed, then we do it.
Okay, so the thing was not to enter the 100K.
Yeah, right now. But
Don't enter the 100K now, and we will work to start the company. We'll get money, and we'll see how it goes, and then.
Oh, no, not going to this 100K, but we will keep going until we'll find a way to keep it going, and if it is good enough in the future, then we do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll find a way to keep going without the 100K.
Yes.
Okay. And
Just
did you
added to
which
that.
one's Sandra?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Sandra.
Okay.
As a student, actually, we refused the first proposal. In the first proposal, he actually recommend us to create another IP, which is slightly different from the original IP.
Okay.
But based on our capability, I don't think our 3 students are able to create a IP and then compete in the 100K. Therefore, we accept the second proposal, which is he actually find a job for us.
Okay.
And then we can actually leverage to talking to the company and then really like learn the technology a little bit more.
Okay, so that met your interest about getting a job, and it met your interest about not making your invention so public at this point. Okay, good. Was there someone over here? Another person?
Yeah, so I think we were also negotiating a lot. It seems like one of the interests is that she doesn't want to run a company. She just wants to be an inventor. So one idea that we were throwing around was her doing a provisional patent and then conditionally licensing that to the students, because she just wanted to be the inventor. That's one approach. That does, however, violate the non-disclosure interest. So trying to negotiate that is a little difficult. maybe that's something Sandra could get past, and perhaps in order to, as she wants to control her IP, simply do continuing patents on that first patent, just so she can really dive into that field and get breadth, create a moat, so to speak.
So protect her IP by creating more of it and adding more and more patents. Did anybody address the, hey, is it scalable problem? Oh, what was your solution for that?
Not entering the 100K and pursuing more of a stealth validation mode where maybe, again, going to someone else's comment on trying to find other funding to prove scalability of this solution before making it public.
Okay, and are Sandra the student?
I was Sandra.
And what does the student say about that?
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, agreed.
You were fine with that. Okay, so not enter the 100K, but really focus on getting the product to work. Okay, so does anyone else want to add anything? Any other comments? So this company, when I met the students, I sort of begged them to let me help them because I knew it was going to be a difficult conversation for them. And again, they were like, no, it'll all work out. So any guesses as to what really happened? Okay, so this is actually from the person. The student inventor never had any agreement. The inventor took her invention and moved forward with it to another group. But on the good news, one of the main students, or a bunch of the students, one of them, he graduated MIT, got his MBA, and has a wonderful job. He said one other thing. He goes, thanks, Mindy. He wrote me a nice letter. One other thing that came up a lot was the fact that she'd set milestones, after which we'd planned to discuss the licensing issue. And every time we met a milestone, she just raised the bar and set a new one. Very frustrating. Does that ever happen? Is this a one of? Okay. So are there any comments on this? Yes.
Like all of her interest is, I want to take the upside without putting myself in, like having anything risky to do with this. Or like I don't want to take the risk, I want to reap the reward. So
Well, first of all, I made a case study out of it, and I'm just telling you what happened, what really happened at the end, and why she pulled out, because they kept meeting her milestones, but she really did not want to start a company with them, but she didn't want to say it, right? And she had no agreement, so she was able to just take her technology and find someone else. So that's what happened. Yes.
What you're describing happened 90% to us 20 years ago. So we entered at 50K. We did well. We ended up being finalists. And the technology team, the scientific team decided to kind of pull out. And well, nothing happened. Well, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if actually ever commercialized the technology. Okay. Maybe stayed here at MIT and was never made a business.
Okay. Yes.
I was curious going into this. Well, what would you advise these sort of students to do where they're trying to like prove their worth and they can't really say, let's write a teaming agreement as you try to prove your worth? So how would you advise them?
I think you can still write an agreement saying, okay, what will it take for me to prove that I can do this? Okay, and you say, okay, if you do the following things, right? I think you can write that down, write expectations on both sides. But the thing is, then you have to stick to it, right? And nothing was ever written down, nothing. And so she could say, look, I don't really want to make a company because I don't know if you can run a business. How can you prove to me that you know how to run a business? Or maybe they'd say, look, why don't we get someone from the Sloan School to join us, you know? Or why don't we bring in that expertise? If you're not comfortable with me running your business, could we have, you know, like a part-time, you know, CFO or whatever to help us run the business and teach us. You know, there's a lot of solutions to that, right? You don't know how to run a business. There's a lot of possibilities. Like, could you get someone to help? Can, you know, is it maybe just a course I need to take? Or, you know, I mean, you don't really know what the person is thinking when they're saying, you don't know this or that. And I would just ask, well, what are solutions? Is there any solution to this? Yeah. Okay. So the thing is can you come to an agreement that works for both of you? And maybe you can't, but then the students would know, okay, there's no way I can prove to you that I'm going to do this, that I can do this. So maybe, you know, maybe we should part ways. You know what I'm saying? Like if there's no agreement, you have to, again, they tell you if there's no agreement, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if I don't get an agreement with Sandra? Maybe I'll find another person who wants to have an agreement with me, right? And it's funny because once I was teaching this a couple years ago, and you know, someone was able to send in a question like, "Oh, my partner doesn't want to write up an agreement. Is this a red flag?" And I asked the students. I said, "Okay, how many of you think it's a red flag?" And like the whole class raised their hand. So I mean, that's really what it's about. All right, so I have 15 minutes to go through the rest of this, and I'm going to have to go very quickly, but this was important because it's about dealing with your co-founders. And again, within a company, you may have more than 2 parties, difference in power levels, legal ramifications, and you may have another level of confidentiality. So this is another real case that I did. Judy wants to apply for a promotion to marketing manager. And so I had her write up all the interests. Like what is your company interests? You know, they want revenue. They want effective leadership at all levels. They want to grow their employees. They want to have more diversity. They want more client projects. You know, her manager, well, he wanted to look effective. And if you grow an employee, it looks great. But on the other hand, he needs to get his set of work done. Judy's interest, she wanted to continue with the company, be seen as competent, get a raise, and want to be part of a team, wanted more challenging work. And of course, you know, we thought about, well, what do your teammates want? She says, well, they probably want to move up too, but they also, you know, everybody wants to be seen as a good employee and a good team. So I made her, this is all hers, writing down what she thought all the interests were. And she wanted to be marketing manager. So what I did is I sent her this. Now this is not the exhaustive list of marketing responsibilities, but here are the things that marketing people as managers have to worry about. And I left it at that. I said, well, just think about this, and here's all the list of things. So later I find out what she did is she took this list, exactly as is, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and put a value 1, 2, 3 of importance on it, and wrote up a plan for every single one of these things. So when she went to again, it was her company, but that she'd worked there, when she went in for the interview, she presented a complete marketing plan for every single one of these things, and she got the job. But, and this is one thing I should tell, you know, students. I just came from, there's an undergraduate practice opportunities class, which is a experiential learning, teaching students how to work at jobs and work on teams and things like that. But one of the things is that being prepared for the interview, but this is again her company, so she could actually go through these things and figure them out. But I mean, even if you're not, you know, just really being prepared and understanding that. So is this helpful to think about? Okay, so that's sort of within a company. And the last thing is actually another a negotiation between companies, and this happened also to me in my company. So I'm Little Inc., and we had a contract with Big Inc. And I worked for a small company. We were like 20 people forever. The contract was written. It was a fixed cost contract, okay? And they paid us up front. But in the contract, it said, we can cancel at any time for any reason, and we'll figure out how to pay you for time and materials already spent. So first of all, changing from fixed fixed contract to time and materials, it never works. But second of all, even when you have the best contract, and this Big Inc. was big, big, big. They have stables of lawyers. And the contract was so vague. And Joe, do you ever have like big, huge companies that have, it was basically, they basically say, it said, oh, you'll figure out a way to figure this out. Do you find that ever in your contracts?
I try not to do that.
No, I don't know, you don't do it.
Right.
But I'm just saying that even when you have 300-page contracts, there are things that people haven't thought of, but this was a very big thing. So they called us up and they said, we're canceling, and it wasn't due to our problem. And they'd been a good customers before. It was their financial issues. They needed to look better for their financial people. So they said, and we're going to need some money back. Okay, so what happened is I went around, so I was representing the service manager, customer service, and we had a CFO and the salesperson, and then we thought about Big Inc. So we went around and around in my team, and everyone said, I should do this, I should do that. I said, well, let's step back. What are our interests as a company? So for example, the easiest one is, what is the sales executive's interest? Commission. Do I have to give my commission back, right? And how about, okay, I'm the Little Inc. CFO. What are my interests? What does the CFO care about? Profit and loss. What happens if I have to give cash back? Cash flow. Any other things? Let me just tell you, we came up with 3 pages of interests. But again, we thought about it. And I'll read you some of them after. But anyway, so what's my interest as service manager? What do I care about? The customer, a happy customer, and the relationship. And how about Big Inc.? What do they care about? Looking good financially. Hey, whose idea was it to buy this thing anyway? Right? So somebody had made a decision to buy it, and they didn't want to look bad either. Okay. So any other interests that you can think of? This is real people, and it really happened. So of course, the sales executive was concerned about, follow-on business. And actually, he was for the original contract costs were fair and reasonable. He was for keeping it. The service, I wanted to reserve the relationship, but I did want acknowledgement that we did work. Whatever money we had to give back, I wanted them to acknowledge that we put in a lot of work on it. So the actual dollar value wasn't so important to me as them saying, hey, we know you did a lot of work. The other thing is, I wanted to keep this negotiation at our level. The sales executive was like, oh, let's just get the lawyers involved. And I'm like, no, we do not want to get the lawyers involved. I did not want to get the CEO involved. And the CFO was also on that. She didn't want the lawyers involved. We did not want it to escalate to the CEO. Again, it's a small company, so that's all there was. There was just a CEO. But again, she didn't want to be seen like, oh, we're Little Inc., you can walk all over us. Oh, but she wanted it to be fair, didn't want to be taken advantage of, and she did want to get some money for work that we already had done. The Big Inc. is, they were worried about the financial stability of the company, but they did want to be, we made assumptions that based on us knowing them, that they really weren't out to stomp us. They liked the product, and maybe they would want to buy it later. And the person who approved the purchase didn't want it to look like it had been a bad decision, and they didn't want to anger upper management, and they also didn't want to escalate it to their stable of lawyers. Okay. So we took all of this, and our CFO came up with a solution space. What could we afford to give back? And she just thought, well, we thought about this, and again, I have like 3 pages of other things, like didn't want to be taken advantage of, didn't want to think like, oh, we're a small company and we don't know what we're doing, right? She didn't want Big Inc. to think that, you know, we were a bunch of yokels and didn't know how to run a business. So there were all these other things besides the actual money, but we did want to get something paid. And we did want to preserve the relationship. And again, we were very concerned about it escalating. So what happened? The night before the big talk, I called my counterpart and I said, can you tell us anything? And he said, I cannot, but I would like to just say, could you please just listen first and then talk about it after. Just listen to what we have to say. So we get on the phone, and we're you know, the days of the speakerphone, you guys remember those little triangle things? And we're smushed into a little office, and like, you can feel the tension. You know, so they call us, and you know, we say hi. And then the next sentence is, they said, we want this much back. And our CFO says, okay. And that was it, and the tension went away, and we just had a nice chat afterwards. Well, what is that? We just took the first offer. What kind of negotiation is that? Any ideas? Did we do it? You know, typically when I teach this, there's always someone who says, you did not do the fiduciary responsibility for your company because you didn't try to get a better deal. Right. We cared about the relationship. Any other thoughts? So what was important to us? We actually had our list of things that were important. We had our list of what we could afford to give back, and it was within our solution space. And we thought that even saying one more thing would have jeopardized the relationship. And we just couldn't do that. We just didn't want to take the chance. So what wound up happening is we gave them the money back. They remained customers, and they bought again later, and we maintained the relationship with the people, and it was a really win-win for both of us. Now I want to tell you the opposite story, because another friend of mine, he was in the same situation, a different company, his Little Inc. and Big Inc. And it was with an investor, and the negotiations were going on and going on. He thought, I'm just going to ask for one more thing. And they did, and it completely blew up. The person took their money and never spoke to them ever again. So you have to think sometimes the first offer is the best offer, and you really have to weigh, are you meeting your interests? That it's not necessarily the dollar amount, it's are you meeting your interests? And I want to tell you one more negotiation. So IBM and 3M, we're negotiating this was like in the days of mag tapes, right? So 3M was the mag. Anyway, they were negotiating, and one of the things they did is they wrote down they negotiated for, well, first of all, when they were starting, 3M said, let's talk about interest. Let's talk about interest. And IBM was like, no, we want to negotiate. We want to negotiate. And for 3 days, 3M insisted on let's talk about interest. Finally, IBM gives in, and they talk about what they're interested in. And they negotiate for a while. They come up with an agreement. And it takes them a while. And then the lawyer says, okay, what are we going to do in 5 years when we come to a big disagreement or things that we haven't thought about in this contract? So what they decided to do is they wrote in this contract that should 3M and IBM ever disagree about this contract, the 2 CEOs will go to lunch. And that was written in the contract. The CEO of IBM and the CEO of 3M will go to lunch. With that, all sides agreed, and they signed the contract, and it worked very well. So even things like that, they said that we don't know what they're going to talk about, but they're going to go to lunch and then figure it out. So that was I thought that was a very creative solution, and I think the two companies, I mean, I don't know, I mean, this happened years ago, but they remained very good friends or co-companies for what they did. All right, so startups, make sure you understand the interests of the other founders. Document your decisions and the reasons. Review your agreements periodically. Again, you can even reconfigure your founders agreement. It's whatever two people agree to. So don't feel like everything is written in stone or whatever, etched in stone, is that you can renegotiate. And again, for negotiations, prepare. Okay, before you go in there, write down everything you can think of that he might be interested, what your company is and interested in. Think about what you're going to say and write it all down with your team and really, really prepare. So they finally got the meeting. They walk in the door, and the guy literally says, "What do you want?" And she started the conversation as, "Well, I think you might be interested in having your technology be more available to people. And I think you might be interested in blah, 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 whatever." And so she started with, "I think you might be interested in." And she called me up. She says, "Hey, I got some of them wrong." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I got some of his interests wrong." I said, "So what happened?" He corrected me. He told me, "No, I'm not really interested in that, but I am interested in that." Anyway, her company got the deal, and again, she got a promotion. So thinking about these things really can change the way you think about negotiation. All right, that's all I have, but thank you. Has this been helpful to think about? All right, so yeah, you can send me email if you have questions. So I'm happy to help anybody. Anyway, good luck with your companies, and may all your negotiations go smoothly. Thank you.